if you engage in sustainability and ESG practices, it is a strong possibility that and you do it in a good way, then it gives you some kind of a competitive advantage. You means thinking of a business entity. The other possibility is that you are not going to get any competitive advantage, but you will certainly get a disadvantage if you do not engage in sustainability and ESG. So there's a push, and that push is to conform to what the others are doing, what the crowd is doing. So both things can be a possibility, and this is what we are going to try to answer during the course of the webinar. If we do give a good answer to it, or a reasonably good answer to it, then we can conclude that we have done a good job. If we cannot, and we are still confused at the end of this whole thing, then we should say that we have done a bad job. So just keep this at the back of your minds, that this is what we really want to answer. And so let me put it in slightly different words. And that would be that, does ESG give you the possibility to outperform others? That's a competitive world. You want to go ahead. So this is just a reframing of the thing in a different way. Okay. And to begin, let's do a small poll that Tanya is going to host for us. And let's just collect some opinions on what people feel about things, so that we are roughly on the same page when we go ahead. So Tanya, can we have the poll?
Yes, the poll is already on the screen for everyone. And I see most people are actually voting for the second option, which is sustainability is the activity, whereas ESG is a set of tools, frameworks for measuring and analyzing the activity.
Okay. So thanks for that, because I really cannot see the results of the poll on my screen when I am engaging in that.
Yeah.
Okay. So people are sort of aligned with what a lot of experts actually think about the whole thing. This would be a definition that some people would strictly want to follow, and other people like me would be lax about it. My reason for being lax is that I do not disrespect the experts in any way, but I do want to go ahead with something that is understandable for people. And that is that, see, it's context driven. Like most things, it's context driven. And therefore, for purposes of what we're going to discuss today, we will actually be using the terms synonymously, one against the other, one for the other, and not try to make any differentiation out here. But if we were to engage in some kind of an academic discussion, then what people are voting for is actually the right answer. So if you want to stick with that, it's fine. But you can also, like me, be lax about the whole thing and take something that is more digestible to common folks who do not want to actually hair split on many things. Okay. Now, this is actually the title of a very important report, and I've just copy-pasted it from the report itself. The report was produced by KPMG, and they went ahead and studied interest in ESG. And their report says that if you look at the top, they studied a lot of companies. They studied 5,800 companies. And their search of the whole thing said that if they take the whole pool, it's about 80%. 80% companies are actually reporting on sustainability in various ways. If you look at the top 250 companies, 96% of them are putting in sustainability reports. Please keep in mind that a lot of these companies are headquartered in places where it's not mandatory to publish a sustainability report. So it's by choice that the leading companies in the world are reporting on sustainability. And this rhymes in with what Tanya was saying in the introduction, that sustainability is something that's become very commonplace. Okay, what's the situation for India? See, we have evolved in a different way from the Western world. In the Western world, sustainability and ESG have been sort of market driven. Whereas in India, the case has been that the regulator has forced things down our throat. And this is what is happening in our case. So the government has entrusted the responsibility of sustainability reporting to SEBI. That's the Securities and Exchange Board of India. And the Securities and Exchange Board of India has asked about the top 1,000 companies to report on their ESG performance through a framework that they have designed, and that's called the Business Sustainability Reporting System for the country. It's called BRS, Business Responsibility Sustainability Reporting. So we find ourselves in a world where the leaders are definitely reporting on sustainability. There's no doubt on that. If you go by the KPMG report, or you go by the situation in India, where the big, according to market capitalization, the top 1,000 companies in the country are reporting on ESG as a mandatory thing. Okay, looking at it from another angle, and that I thought would be interesting, is that there's a lot of research happening on ESG. Most of this is not by compulsion, very direct compulsion. Most of it is voluntary. And you see that if we plot a cumulative graph of all the research that's happening, there's an inflection point somewhere around 2000, 2005, where there is a sharp acceleration in the whole thing. And that picks up. So looking at it not from a compliance perspective, but from something which is very voluntary, that there's a lot of research that's happening on the topic. And why is that happening? Because it reflects interest in the subject itself. So we, with that in mind, can now start thinking of it. And the thought is that businesses are not here to do sustainability. They're not philanthropic organizations, they're not NGOs. They are there to earn money. They are there to grow the capital that they have. They may want at times to have more capital invested in them, but then they want a return on the capital, and that's their central activity, whatever they do. It doesn't matter if it's a service company, or it's a company that engages in mining, or it's a company that engages in cutting diamonds. Every business at its core wants to increase the wealth that it today has and grow. From that perspective, sustainability does appear to be something at the margin. And if it is something at the margin, would it actually contribute to economic success? We think that yes, it is true that sustainability is something at the margin, but it is also something that cannot be ignored. It's something like this, that you are sleeping in a blanket or a quilt in a very cold winter night. The margin also has to be kept in mind. You have to be well tucked in, because if you're not well tucked in, the cold oozes in from wherever you're not tucked in properly, and it messes up things. The same is true about ESG and sustainability today, for two reasons. One, there is a compliance requirement. In many countries, many societies, and many sectors, it's a mandatory requirement. The other is, and probably equally important, and probably more important in certain countries, is that the market is pushing the whole thing in a particular direction. And therefore, this marginal entity cannot be ignored in any sense of the word. So, yes, let's agree on one thing. It's not a core act. Sustainability is not something core for businesses. It's something at the margin, but then it's an entity at the margin that cannot be ignored. When we get into this, we will need to differentiate between two kinds of sustainability. One is what I would prefer to call common practices, in tune with many scholars who sort of agree on it. So, what are common practices in sustainability? What everyone else is doing. That's it. If somebody else is creating an environment management system and following ISO 14001 to do so, and I'm also doing the same, I'm just engaging in a common practice. That's something that has become vogue. So it's fashionable, it's compulsory, it's mandatory to do so. So it's just the same as you're going to a party and you know that everyone will be dressed formally, or everyone will be dressed in ethnic clothes. So what you do is that you follow the dress code. So just think of this as the common practices in ESG are things that most organizations do, and they do it because everyone else is doing. Everyone else is arriving at the party in ethnic clothes, so I cannot be the odd person out, because if I remain the odd person out, I lose business, and I do not want to lose business. So that's one. The other thing is that you conceive of it, ESG as an entity that will help you differentiate. You would differentiate yourself by doing many things, and among those many things, one of the things is ESG. So that is the market differentiator for you. And if it's a market differentiator, then it is worthy of, if it is actually capable of being a market differentiator, then we do need to investigate the subject and understand it to some level. So, just substantiating that we actually may want to occupy an unexploited or underexploited position, and therefore we do want to develop a unique strategy to do that. An important component of that unique strategy can be our ESG positioning. A lot of companies actually project themselves that way these days. So ESG is interwoven into their marketing display. Um, why should we be a bit worried about ESG? Let me just show you a graph. This graph is nothing but an averaging of the temperatures. It's a temperature history of the world. It's a graph that has recorded and averaged out fluctuations in different parts of the globe. So just to understand it for perspective, supposing I am speaking from Delhi. So temperature in Delhi has fluctuated over the years in a certain way. And supposing the temperature in Denmark, and we think of the temperature in Copenhagen, and that has also fluctuated over the years. So we plot the fluctuations and then work out the average of the fluctuations, and this is what we get. What we get, despite all these fluctuations that are happening, there's zigzag, 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 all these things. Over the course of the last 2000 years, I have a different plot for the other things as well, but let's just stick to this. So despite all these zigzags, you would see that it hovers around some kind of a mean. And then over the course of the last 150 or 180 odd years, something starts happening. And that something is this thing that is inside an oval or a circle on your screens. And this something is what is commonly termed as global warming. The temperature is of the Earth, the planet, is shooting up all across. It's shooting up at places on the equator. It's shooting up at places in the temperate zones. It's shooting up everywhere. There will be fluctuations. One place can have a very hot summer, and another place can have a milder summer, like the case has been this year for Europe and India. Europe has had a horrible summer this year, whereas India has had a mild summer this year. Despite everything, this graph is going up and up and up. And it has very serious implications for the survival of the human race on the planet itself. The effort at the moment is to somehow contain this global warming, because if we are not able to contain this global warming, the planet itself will become unlivable because of many things. Rising ocean levels, unpredictable weather patterns, very severe weather events like extreme rainfall leading to flash floods, or prolonged and very severe droughts. In both cases, you would be ending up with disruptions of the agricultural systems, the food production systems. So, and then there are all kinds of messier things that would happen, for which we would, we just cannot digress at the moment. But all I want to show you and scare you a bit is in this slide and the next one. See, this is a place where we've talked and heard stories about when we were kids in school. That's the North Pole. So the North Pole is nothing but a piece of ice that floats on the ocean. There's no earth, there's no land beneath the ice out there. Unlike the South Pole. The South Pole is situated on a continent called Antarctica, but there's no continent or there's no island where the North Pole ice is situated. All the North Pole ice is just ice floating on the sea. But the ice is so thick that people walk across it, people land helicopters on it, people land planes on it, and people do all sorts of things on it today. So, and this is the place where explorers went and would sort of make their calculations and then plant the flag of their country. And that's what this picture shows. If you were to go and do it this summer, you could do something similar. We're talking of the year 2026. What would happen in the summer of 2060? This would be the situation in the summer of 2060 if this keeps on happening. And the most likely trajectory at the moment is that this is going to happen. I'll get into this question in a more serious way in the following slides. But at the moment, we are in for something like this, that you will not have a place to plant the flag of your country because the ice at the North Pole would have disappeared over the next 3.5 decades. That is the serious prediction at the moment. See, we are responsible for it. We human beings are responsible for it. It is something that is happening because we are putting together, releasing these bad guys into the atmosphere. These are the greenhouse gases that we are releasing into the atmosphere because we are burning up fossil fuels. And these are the bad guys, all of them. The carbon dioxide, methane, these are the guys who are responsible for the global warming that I was talking of. So we do need to think in terms of sustainability and ESG. And if the world is taking more interest with every passing year in sustainability and ESG, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. But the story so far is not so good. See, this is the growth of those bad guys that I was showing you on the screen. Those bad molecules, the greenhouse gas molecules. And it's just going up and up and up and up. You know this dip? It's the point in which we sort of had some problems. Otherwise, with all these fluctuations, it's a graph that's growing up. This vertical line that I've placed here is 1988. This is the point at which a very important organization, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, was set up. The IPCC is a body with 3,000 of the foremost scientists on the planet. And these people put together, brought out report after report, warning the world that we are going in a bad way. But even after the IPCC was set up, this is the trajectory that you see. So there's actually no change in human behavior, despite 3,000 of the world's foremost climate scientists who are a part of the IPCC warning everybody and trying to speak sense to the world. So these guys have been publishing reports and trying and making pleading and with governments and doing a lot of things, but the world just keeps on doing what it wants, what it's used to doing, and that's the trend so far. It is something extremely unwelcome, but it's happening. So there's a deadline. And that deadline is that by the year 2050, over the next 2.5 decades, we will actually have leveled out this curve converted into some kind of a flat line like this portion out here. So that's the objective that has been set, 2050. Unfortunately, at the moment, it doesn't appear to be leveling out like this. It appears to be moving up and up like that. So there are lots of worried people in the world, and I would also want you to give your thoughts on this. So Tanya is going to just flash another short, small poll on your screens, and then Tanya will just have to give me an idea of what kind of response we're getting to that.
Okay, so
So
all the poll is already live on everyone's screen. Feel free to participate. There are no right or wrong question answers, so please shoot. And of course, Hardeep sir will then let you know the answer. The poll question is: we can expect renewable energy to replace fossil fuels and become the main form of energy used by, and then there are year options: 2040, 2050, 2070, and not before the turn of this century. So the poll will be live for another 20 seconds. Feel free to engage with it. Tell us your answers, what you think. We can expect renewable energy to replace fossil fuels and become the main form of energy used by which year? And the options are 2040, 2050, 2070, and not before the end of the century. Okay, so it's a minute now. I'll be ending the poll and sharing the results. Most people feel there is an equal division between 2040 and 2050, and then some people also think 2070. And actually, more people think not before the end of the century than who think 2070. So, sir, what is the right answer for this?
So I'm happy that we have a lot of optimists out here. Unfortunately, see, if we do convert to renewable energy by 2040, 2050, or even 2060, this portion of this graph would have flattened out. It'll be moving like this. It'll not be climbing the way it's been climbing, and therefore, if we do think that that's going to happen, that's something, and we can do it. It's something very welcome. Unfortunately, history, when it speaks of human behavior, gives a message that is not at all pleasant. So I'm going to share a few things with you. See, there have been multiple transitions in terms of energy use. One of the most important transitions was that we sort of moved away from using biomass, that is wood, and moved on to coal as the main source of energy. Then from coal, we sort of gravitated onto oil. From oil, the next move has been towards gas. And the current expectation is that we'll just put all this coal, oil, and gas aside and then move on to renewable forms of energy. And thereby, we will solve the global warming problem. Now, what does history say? You discover coal at one point of time, you start using it, but it takes humanity almost 200 years for coal to replace biomass. So people were, at the beginning of the 1900s, people were still burning wood, but coal had become the main form of energy that was being used, but it took humanity 200 years to make that transition. Let's talk of the next transition. From coal to oil, you discover oil somewhere around 1859-60. It does not overtake coal till another 100 years. And despite that move that oil does overtake coal by 1960, the amount of coal that we were using was actually 3 times of what, despite what has happened, that coal has become this number 2 thing. We today are using 3 times of what the amount of coal that we were using in 1960. So we are still using a lot of coal, and oil has sort of been added up to that. What about this? Natural gas is nowhere in the race, actually. It's a world that is primarily using coal and oil, and we're talking of 2026. What do we want? We want the world to forget biomass, that is wood, forget coal, forget oil, forget natural gas, and move on to renewable energy. That is how we will be able to solve the global warming climate change problem. Are we there? History says that we do not transit from one form of energy to another. It's just a pile-on. Look at the figures on your right. There is a reduction in this thing is missing out here. The wood, the picture of the wood, it's missing out here. But this is the reduction in the biomass use. Coal has grown over this period of 10-year period. Oil usage has grown. Gas has grown. Renewables have grown significantly. But these guys who are not supposed to be growing, who are supposed to be reducing, are still growing. So it's not a story of a transition from one to the other and to the other and to the other, and therefore we can expect a transition onto renewables. The behavior is different. The behavior is that one source of energy gets added on to what people are already doing. And the only reason for biomass reduction out here, reduction in the use of biomass that's here on this portion of the screen, is that biomass is not available today. Most of the forests in the world have been chopped up. So you cannot burn wood. And because you cannot burn wood, and there's a bit of sensitivity also going into the whole thing. So, but despite that, all those good thoughts of being very sensitive, it's not happening out here. In fact, the world is fighting wars for this. The world is fighting wars for this portion of the thing. Okay. Now, let me just, before moving on to something else, most people participating in this webinar are people who live in a part of the world where the impact of all this climate change is going to be a lot severe, because it will lead to loss of life. It will lead to spread of diseases that cannot be contained. It will lead to loss of occupations in a very significant sense. So these are the big reasons why we should be worried about sustainability and ESG. And if there is some growth in the sensitivity to ESG and sustainability, that is something very welcome. Having said all this, this is actually the conclusion that we should be reaching. That it's not about philanthropy at all. It is about managing risk. Risk at a global level, risk at a country level. This man is the Prime Minister of Canada at the moment. And when he made this statement, and it's been often quoted, was when he was in the governor of the bank. Okay. Is it a return on investment? If you're talking of the short term, talking of a 4-5 year period, the actual answer would be no. But if you're talking of the medium or the long term, then it is a definitive yes. What is the basis for making this statement? See, there was this study that was conducted by the World Economic Forum. And this plot on your screen is a picked from that study. So when you look at this, you understand that the biggest element in this pie is 34%, and that is customer demand. So customers today are looking at things that have some element of sustainability built into it, some element of social or environmental sensitivity built into it, some element of sustainable governance built into it. That's one big reason. The other is that the regulator is out there at number 2 spot. But if we were to forget the regulator for the time being and just think of the others, the reputation, the brand reputation, that is a factor. Investor expectations are factors. And you add all these three things, the customer demand, the reputation of the brand, and the expectation of the investors, it comes out to a good 69-70%. So thinking of that, ESG definitely is a return on the investment in the medium and long term. There's no doubt on that. It's when you look at it in a very short-sighted manner that it appears not to be that expenditure that you should be making. So you would refrain from making that expenditure if you think in the short term. The moment you start thinking in the medium or the long term, you would want to spend that money. Okay. There's another important reason. You want to be ready for a market that is changing. And you want to be a step ahead of your competitors. I'll take just one simple example. For people in India, for people outside Europe, anywhere, CBAM is the big thing that's being discussed whenever people think of exporting stuff to Europe. Why? Because Europe is clamping down on emissions that will be permitted to enter European markets. So Europe is trying to contain its own emissions inside Europe. And even if you manufacture the same stuff outside Europe and you emit more wherever you're manufacturing it, they say that we'll make you pay money for whatever extra stuff that you are emitting. So CBAM, the full form is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. It's not free anymore. In the current calendar year, that's 2026, whatever stuff gets imported into Europe, it'll be it's 6 items. It's iron and steel items that are going in, aluminum, cement, fertilizers, hydrogen, and electricity. So these 6 things, if they get imported into Europe from whatever corner of the world, people will have to pay money for whatever extra emissions are associated beyond the European threshold. This makes it very important to correctly calculate the emissions that are associated with the stuff that you're exporting to Europe. Because if you do not correctly calculate the actual emissions, then they will use a default value. And they've set that default value deliberately high at more than 40%. So you will be paying a significant amount of money for whatever you are exporting to Europe. Obviously, the importer is not going to pay out of his pocket. So he is going to find a way to make you pay that money. And therefore, it becomes important that you do a good calculation of this thing. How can you do a good calculation of the whole thing? You need something to be there. You have to have a system in place that is that works, that does an accurate calculation, measurement, and calculation of the whole thing. And this will help you save money. If you do not have such a system in place, you will be making a business mistake. You will end up with something that is not required. The biggest challenge that companies face when they go about doing ESG, again from the World Economic Forum, is that half the problem is that people who have been given the responsibility of ESG are not interested in it. This is something that the World Economic Forum did try to understand. It is one of the big things that need to be resolved in the whole problem. If you want to become a company that wants to lead in the field of ESG, you have to take care of this thing. The number two problem that they identified was something that the targets were not set properly. So the top management is to blame for this part of the problem very clearly. The top management is also to blame for this part of the problem, but partly. This requires significant amount of training that needs to be done to solve the problem. This is what companies need to do if they want to be in the ESG race and want to lead the pack out there. Okay. I would certainly want to cite another big study that has been done, and this was done by Morgan Stanley Capital International. It's today, these days it's called MSCI. Earlier it used to be what I said. So this is an assessment based on how you fare if you're good at ESG. So if you're good at ESG, then you happen to be here. Your capital costs are low. They help you save. If you're bad at ESG, this is where your capital costs are. What they added was just two basic things. If you're borrowing money, you have to pay interest. And if there's equity involved, you have to keep your shareholders happy by giving them something in return for the money that they're investing. So good ESG puts you in this bracket. Bad ESG takes you there. We want to be market differentiators in the whole thing. How do we do it? I just showed you this graph in a different way. The same thing. Lack of employee engagement, unclear targets. So the solution to that is three things. A lot of training of whom the entire workforce. Number two, better involvement of the top management in ESG. For them, it should not be an activity on the margins. Unfortunately, for a lot of companies that engage in ESG, ESG still happens to be a marginal activity for top management. it has come out in survey after survey. So if you want to be good at ESG, you have to actually train the whole workforce, and it includes the top management as well. It's not just the few people who've been asked to report, monitor, and report on ESG. It needs to be a lot of other people. Okay. The associated problem is that most organizations, when they think of sustainability, for them, it's some kind of a mosaic. It's not a comprehensive, integrated program that they engage in, or something that they build on year after year. It's some kind of a checklist that they keep on ticking on, and they say, oh, last year we finished 5 items on this checklist. This year we are going to do 2 more, and then we'll be at level 7 in the whole thing. It's not an integrated, comprehensive plan that is in their minds for what they want to do. And this is another problem that's been noticed. And if you're able to solve this problem for your company, then this is the second thing that an organization should be doing to do better ESG. Number 3, you should be having a supply chain that is ESG sensitive. If you have suppliers that are into ESG, then it'll position you far better than anything else can. So the first thing that we discussed was employee engagement. The second thing that we pointed out was a comprehensive, integrated plan for doing ESG. Number 3, suppliers that are invested in ESG, a supply chain that knows, understands, and implements ESG. The fourth is that we do need to understand that it's a dynamic world. This, even if you are implementing the first 3, you really cannot stop. Why? Because what is a strategic advantage today will become common practice tomorrow. Then you will have to advance on your ESG journey. So point number 2, the plan that we were talking of out here, that it should not be monkey jumping. The ESG plan also needs to understand that it has to be a plan that is foresighted and capable of absorbing the dynamism that the world will be throwing at you. So these are the 4 things that flow out of the discussion that we're trying to have today. And if we go home with these 4 lessons and build upon them, we should be able to position ourselves as in a situation where we're making strategic advances in the whole thing and being able to do that. Before I wind up, I'll just share a contextual worry with you, and we'll close it at that. See, there are 2 opposing, almost mutually exclusive tendencies that are defining the age that we live in. See, one is this, that we are sliding into a less ordered world. What is happening is that a lot of supranational institutions that sort of sustained and regulated and permitted the world to develop over the course of the last 75, 80 years are not effective anymore. It's becoming a world that is sort of sliding into chaos. The UN system is not working. And this is somebody may want to use the word entropy or whatever. That doesn't matter. But this is one tendency that is growing by the decade. Maybe not growing by the month, maybe not growing by the year, but decade after decade, we are actually um, entering a world that is more chaotic than the decade that left us. At the same time, there is also an underlying push to preserve the old order. And this tendency works here. Let's just take another opinion poll on what do you think is the main thing, whether it's the first tendency or the second one. So Tanya, if you could just give me an idea of what people out here think.
So the poll is live. It says out of the two tendencies mentioned on the screen, which one will prevail, which means which one will be more dominating, which one will be more, which will happen more. So the first is we need to brace and be ready for a deglobalized and chaotic world. No one will bother about ESG in this anarchy. This has a chance of happening more, the first option. And the second one is globalization and international order will prevail. Altruism, concern for the planet, collective ethics, etc., will strengthen. So, which out of these two, option one and two, would you think will prevail in the future years to come? Thankfully, sir, we have 88% people who have voted for the second one, which is the brighter future. So the poll will still be live for 20 more seconds. So you can vote on the screen which one do you think will happen. And after this poll, and after you're done with the slides, we'll have a Q&A round, everyone. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I will unmute you and you can ask Hardeep sir your question. Okay, so we are done with the poll now. We have 85% people voting for the second option. So that's a good number, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's something very good. I have some evidence backing up what people feel. And I'm just going to show you that in the next slide. So there was a big deglobalization event that happened about 10 years back. And that was Brexit. Great Britain sort of pulled out, UK pulled out of the European Union. It decoupled, it deglobalized. So this is how UK was situated in 2015, and this is where UK is situated 10 years down the road. Each of these things was a fundamental change in the whole thing. Okay, so this big deglobalization event should be expected, and it was expected, and a lot of people were worried that it's going to change England and it's going to change the England and the rest of the European relationship in a big way. And I'll just show you some of the data that's come in. And just take a look at this data. These are UK's exports to the European Union. So before Brexit, it is 47.2. Talking of 2025, despite the fluctuation and a very slight ebb in the middle, it's still back at 47.2. So despite all that big decoupling that happened, Britain is still trading with the European Union at the same level as it was doing 10 years earlier when it was a part of the European Union. And so that sort of this data substantiates the claim that people had when 87% people voted that it's the second tendency that's going to be in charge of the future. if we do not want to be blamed for just being very selective about what we're talking of, I'll just show you another one. And this again indicates that yes, there is. See, this is the thing that I showed you on some kind of a year-wise basis in the earlier slide. But even if you look at these tendencies, there is a dip. The dip, however, is not very significant. So these things sort of validate that despite all the kind of political things and the bad political things that are happening in the world, there is a tendency in the world to preserve a lot of the good things that were there, that have been part of our lives till date, and people want to preserve all that. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen and we'll sort of get into the question and answer thing.
Thank you so much for the amazing presentation, sir. I'm sure everyone feels the same way. If anyone has any question, feel free to raise your hand and I will unmute you. You can raise your hand in the React button on the bottom of your screen. There is a question that someone asked, but they have now left the meeting. They sent it to me. We can start with that maybe, sir. The first question, that question was that, can anyone become an ESG officer, or what credibility or credentials do you need to become one if you want to implement ESG in your own company?
So the first credibility for any job is that you should know how to do the job.
Yeah.
So in order to become an ESG officer, the first thing that would be expected is that you study the subject. Then beyond that, it depends upon your employer, what kind of a qualification on paper the employer is looking for, and what kind of a qualification and actual content the employer is looking for. There are many employers who are not bothered about what's written on a piece of paper. They're more interested in what the guy knows, the person knows. So it's pretty open that way. That a lot of people actually, what happens in most situations is that a person is working in a factory, and then some of the ESG work gets transferred to that person, and the management also keeps a watch that this person appears to be interested in this subject area.
Yeah.
So that work gets transferred to the person, and then once it gets transferred to the person starts taking more and more interest in the whole thing. And then people, what they do is that they do take a lot of short courses in order to have a portfolio that on paper also looks matches the actual content of their knowledge and experience, and that